I feel real kin to this part of the country. That's what I want to talk about tonight. I asked Brenda if I might say a few words to somebody about this music that we're going to sing, because I'm an academic at heart, and the study of the music, the study of the songs that I arranged and made a part of Angel Band that we're going to perform, really came from a lot of family interest and heritage, plus just choral interest and interest in mountain instruments and so on. So I'm going to run through it tonight, and I'll be speaking to you all really from 3 books that I've written. I'm going to stay in this one because this one matters most to you all. It's called Knoxville Music Before Bluegrass. All right. The first book I wrote in the series was Nashville Music Before Country, because I got really interested. I taught at Belmont University, and I was in Nashville for a long time. It's sort of my spiritual home. Went to school at Belmont, came back as a teacher there. So I had access to all these archival materials at the State Library and so on. And plus a lot of country music people and other people that I'd met along the way, Mike Herb and others. And so I had these documents and pictures, and I thought, I began to realize and ask myself the question, why Nashville? You know, why Memphis? Why Knoxville and Bristol? Why did all this great American music, how did it happen in Tennessee? Have you thought about it? Why didn't it happen in other surrounding states? What was it about this long, skinny place that we all live? What was it about it that made all this music come from there? So I started digging into that, and what I discovered was, and I'll give you the punchline right now. The story is a beautiful story about migration, but it's also a story that's not without tension, but it's the tension in the migration that brought us this unique music that we have. It broke through barriers of style that gave us the forms that we have. That's the moral of the story. That's the take home from tonight. But let me kind of walk you through how I got there. With Nashville, it really became a place where a lot of this stuff came together at the Grand Ole Opry, which is, y'all been to the Ryman Auditorium down on Broadway. A lot of that, and that was WSM, a radio station that was trying to sell insurance, life and casualty insurance, and they partnered, and they were trying to sell biscuits, and they partnered with the music that they had in their backyard. All right. Well, that's what threw it out into the environment. And Tennessee happened to be a really big distribution place, which started with I-81, which started with the Great Wagon Train Trail that came from the East Coast. I-81 became the Wagon Train Trail. Now, my relatives, probably some of y'all's, I bet a lot of y'all's, came through two ways to get into this state. You either came through the Cumberland Gap, which was my mother's family, Middlesboro, Corbin. That's where they went. Harlan County, Kentucky. That was my mom's family. Or my dad's side of the family, who came through and then went down the Tennessee River and ended up in northern Alabama. But those were the 2 entrances, either the Cumberland Gap area for people to go west. Well, we happened to be the entryway for all that to happen. It was Tennessee, over here, a little further over there. My grandfather was from Frog Level, Virginia. Anybody ever Frog Level? I've got a picture because I probably should just get some of our family members together and try to buy this house. But this house still exists. This is in Frog Level, Virginia, where my maternal grandfather, actually grew up. I think the front yard, or the backyard is in Virginia, and the front yard is in Tennessee. Yeah. So that's my mom's side of the family. My dad's side of the family, as I said, went on to Alabama through the Tennessee River, and they're just over the line. If you know Pulaski, Tennessee, just below Pulaski, you cross the Tennessee River and you go into Alabama, and that's where my dad's side of the family was from. So I was very interested in our history a lot because of their migration patterns, but also I have to say personally, as a autobiographical, I grew up in West Virginia, and my parents, as I said, from Kentucky and Eastern Tennessee. My dad was a Baptist minister, and so we moved around a lot. He had a heart for mission work, and so he actually did what they call church planting in West Virginia. So I grew up as a kid, really interested in music, but riding with my dad to all these church plants that he was doing, which were up and down these hollows all over southern West Virginia and southwestern West Virginia, which nobody knows where it is. It is. There weren't roads there when I was a kid. If you wanted to go to some place like really a great big town like Pikeville, Kentucky, or even if you wanted to get to Charleston, West Virginia, it took you forever to get to those places back in those days. I remember going to see my grandmother in Corbin, Kentucky from Williamson, West Virginia, and it took us hours to get there. It's not, as a crow flies, very far. But you all know, I just came off the hill that you all know this is what you have to navigate here. Well, that has a lot to do with why our music was preserved so well here, is that it was birthed here, it was seeded here, it grew up here, and it didn't really have a great way of getting out until WSM radio and 100,000 watts of broadcasting threw it into other markets, and people liked it. But 1927 was a big year for this part of the country. Anybody know what happened in Bristol, Tennessee in 1927? The recording sessions took place. OK Records and RCA Records came down here. These were carpetbaggers from the north. They came down here and started recording the Carter family and all the stuff that made this part of the country well known, because they got on records. They got played through distribution centers. But this was going on in the hills, as we know, for a long time. Now, back in the 19th century, a guy, no relation to me, by the name of Cecil Sharp, came over here with his secretary, Claude Marples, and they actually, with wagons, went up into the hills, and they were called song catchers. You may have seen the movies. These are really good movies called Song Catchers. And they went up and they wrote down songs that people like my grandmother would have been able to sing to them. And they actually recorded them on paper and got them down on paper. So those tunes, we know, were being incubated in the hills of eastern Tennessee, western Virginia, western North Carolina, West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, all those tunes. And where did the tunes come from? Well documented. They came from England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and so on. Yeah, great story. I told it at Fatima last year. I hope y'all have, if you haven't heard it, humor me. It's a story of King William of Orange. A lot of people were fleeing Ireland and fleeing England and coming over here for lots of different reasons during the reign of King William of Orange. And they were singing ballads. It's called song journalism. They would pass on news and stories and anecdotes through songs. Well, songwriting hasn't changed. We're still, I don't care if you're Taylor Swift, you're still telling stories through songs. It used to be that the songs that we sang, though, actually documented events. And they would go on for a long time, to tell the whole story. Those people had lots of time to be entertained. We also, as banjo players, had a lot of fills to do, because like on verse 14, people were getting kind of tired of the song, so it was time for us to do a little fill on banjo, and then we'd go to verse 15. But those songs went on and on and on. They told stories. Well, those stories that they were telling of King William of Orange were just about their trials, just about their family stories, often about love, often about carousing around, death, murders. Those were great stories to tell. No different than our crime TV shows. It was still, if it bleeds, it sells, or if it whatever. And those songs were telling stories about life and death and love. And but the stories they were telling about King William of Orange got shortened, and the guys that were singing them would sing about King Billy instead of King William. And that's what songwriters do. We play with things and we shorten it and we make poetry out of it. But these songs about King Billy, and they got to be called, when they were in West Virginia and they were in this part of the country, they were called the Billy Boys that sang these songs. And then they talked about the Billy Boys of the Hills. And that got turned around to becoming the songs of the Hillbillies. Right. So that was really a noble term that was used for people that spread songs, hillbillies. Billy Boys of the Hills that sang the songs. So that heritage of song and entertainment was very much trapped in our area of Appalachia. But in 1927, we recorded it. Now, my books that I'm here to talk about right now that have documented this. This was the story I wanted to tell. I wanted to say, well, okay, we know about 1927, the Bristol recording sessions, and we know about the Ryman Auditorium and WSM Radio and the Grand Ole Opry. And then over in Memphis, I was at Rhodes College for a decade teaching there, and I got really interested in what happened before the blues in Memphis. Memphis became known because W.C. Handy was there and other really important blues players, B.B. King and others more modern, but the blues were born on Beale Street in that area, Cotton Exchange and so on. But I was interested in, well, what before that? Why before that? Why did those places catch on? So coming back to Knoxville, the why here really has a lot to do with a convergence of 3 or 4 things. First, it was the song sources themselves coming from England, Ireland, Wales, Scotland, so on. Those tunes rode on the boats with the people. And when they got here, they were singing the same songs that they were singing over there. And they got transferred. Now, they got modified and they got changed. Things like Amazing Grace that we sing. Some of you all know Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace was actually a sea shanty. It wasn't a hymn. One of my favorite hymns is What Wondrous Love Is This, O My Soul. That in my High Lonesome Mass, I end the Mass with What Wondrous Love Is This. That was a sea shanty that was sung by sailors. And it just got religious words got put on top of it. Well, that happened over and over again. Thousands of songs that were brought. So the tune sources really came from the migration of many of our ancestors who were Scotch-Irish or Ulster-Irish. Now, the words themselves, the words that we sing, are often anonymous in these early songs, these folk songs. We don't know the authors of Jenny Lind and Bill Monroe and his Uncle Pen bluegrass song. He talks about different characters in different songs. Jenny Lind, he talks about 2 or 3 songs he mentions. We don't know the authors of any of those words or those songs. They were just passed on, and original authors were not known. Often they were what we call white spirituals. They were spirituals sung in the white church, and they were modified and passed on. So the words, we're not sure. Now, the thing that I got, though, very interested in when it comes to the music that you're going to hear in our Angel Band and the bluegrass music that I like to play was the style that becomes uniquely bluegrass, okay? Because bluegrass is a uniquely American, Tennessee, Kentucky song form, okay? You can look at other song forms and relate them to German art songs or English ballads, but bluegrass music really belongs to us here in Kentucky and Tennessee. And folks, truthfully, folks from Western North Carolina, such as Ralph Stanley and other folks like that. So I got interested in what distinctive pieces make up the style that we know that's absolutely bluegrass. First thing let me tell you about, and you're going to see it in Angel Band that we're going to sing tonight, and at Fatima last year, was it year before last? 2? Has it been 3 years? Oh, time flies. Oh my gosh. Well, we did one of my major pieces that I've written, which is High Lonesome Bluegrass Mass there. But one of the first things you're going to notice about bluegrass music is that it's made up of a unique set of instruments. Right? You don't find this combination of instruments in any other style. This one, okay, the banjo, which probably came from West Africa. It was probably, the word is probably Banger, B-A-N-G-E-R, was probably close to the name that it was called in West Africa. Over in West Africa, it was probably a 3-stringed instrument. It's made out of a gourd and a stick and the gut of an animal. That's how it was constructed. And I've made several of those kind. Yeah. I've made them out of gut, I've made them out of strong gourd, and I made them out of stick. The problem with all those things is every one of those things deteriorates and will not last you too long, and it doesn't make much sound. Yeah, it's a very mellow sound when you put it together. So the instrument that I'm holding here developed the way it is like this in the United States. The ring here was actually an adaptation from a gourd. When they got tired of gourds rotting, they started using the wheel of a tire. It was a tractor tire wheel that was that ring that you see in here. Okay? Well, that changed the tone a lot. It went from kind of a mellow sound to a twang. Yeah. The second thing, of course, we put metal strings on it. And then the number of strings developed. The banjo that you're going to always find in bluegrass music is the 5-string banjo. And here's one of the things that the 5-string banjo was trying to imitate. It's made up of 2 things that are important in the style. One is a drone. Now, you all know bagpipes. You hear that constant drone sound. That means one pitch that doesn't change. You probably have choir members just like that. One pitch. I'm just kidding. I don't know your choir. I don't know. But no, you have one pitch that doesn't change. And you can work with that. You can work with it. That's this note here. It's called the G string. So when I play, I'm constantly hitting this drone with my thumb. So you're going to hear. I'm playing that note all the time. That's the drone. And the second part is a roll. That's my fingers doing this down here. A banjo can make 11 sounds in 1 second. If you play it really fast and really hot, because I'm hitting things up here, simultaneously I'm working 3 fingers down here, and I can make 11 different sounds, theoretically. I can make 11 sounds in a second, and that's what we love about bluegrass. It's just frenetic and fast and exciting, right? So that developed, and around the 1930s and 1940s, we've come to that point with Mr. Bill Monroe, who was from Kentucky, Racine, Kentucky, not far from where I live right now, and he was a master at mandolin, but he brought in banjo players that could play the style. The ones that we know best were on the Beverly Hillbillies. They were Earl of the Flattened Scruggs. Come and listen to my story about a man named Jed. Poor mountaineer barely kept his family fed. Then one day he was doing some true and boy, that is black gold, Texas Steve, right? So that was Flattened Scruggs, and that show again popularized 5-string banjo playing, fast picking because of Earl Scruggs. Earl Scruggs is from North Carolina. He's from not Boone. He's from Forest City or something like that. Anyway, he and Lester flat top guitar picker put together, and they had that frenetic fast playing that we characterize bluegrass. So that's the instrument. I think it's sort of the key instruments because that instrument is uniquely from the United States. The other instruments, migration. We got them from other places. Where did we get the guitar from? Anybody know? Spain. Where did we get the fiddle from? Ireland through Stradivarius. Italy. Yeah. So the master fiddle players, makers were in Italy, but of course Ireland is exactly where we think of fiddling going on. So where do you get the double bass? It's just another version of a violin with thyroid condition. You know? And then we've got violin, we got guitar. And then we have this one unique instrument that is part of the color that I think is so special for bluegrass, the mandolin. Where does that come from? Italy, yeah. So what we see with all those instruments, except for this one, is we see coming together of cultures. And I love the image, if you get a chance ever to see the movie Mate One. Matewan. It's about the coal strikes, the worker strikes in Matewan, West Virginia. It's one of the places my dad was pastor, and I grew up going to Boy Scout camp in Matewan, West Virginia. But there's this movie, Matewan, has one scene in it which is just fantastic, and that is one night in the coal camps. They're actually living in tents. They're workers that work in the lumber yards and work in the coal mines, and one night they're gathered around a fire, and in the fire first is someone out there playing a fiddle, and someone hears it and he walks up with his guitar, and another person hears it and he walks up with his banjo, and another person hears it and he walks up with his fiddle. And so you see in what Hollywood does really well in one image, probably poetically, how the bluegrass ensemble was formed. Was here was a black man, here was an Italian man, here was a Spanish man, here was a man from Ireland, and they all come together with their instrument and put together this unique form. So it's a beautiful, beautiful image in that movie. So that's the first thing you're going to see about bluegrass, is you're going to see those unique instruments. Second thing you're going to see about bluegrass, or with bluegrass, is a vocal style that is unique to any. And I taught music history for 20 years, and I can't find anything indigenous that's quite like this style of singing. And it was characterized, again, by Mr. Monroe, who they called in his Bluegrass Boys. But when Bill Monroe sang, he had a characteristic to his voice that is very indicative of people like Ralph Stanley, Vince Gill, Dale McCrory, if you're a man, or if you're a woman, your daughter of this part of the country, Dolly Parton. I love Alison Krauss. Give me some Alison Krauss in my ears, and I'm just happy guy. Allison, Dolly, Emmylou Harris. It's this high, sort of plaintive sound that became known as the high lonesome sound. And that's what I called my bluegrass mass. I called it a high lonesome bluegrass mass, because I was playing off of the words, as my Catholic friends know, a high mass, which is sung, and high lonesome, which is bluegrass music. I stuffed those together and called it the high lonesome bluegrass mass. But the idea is this high plaintive sound that's over everything else. Now let me tell you where that came from. I believe, I have never read this in a treatise anywhere, and I'm going to write it, I believe it came from the first shape note hymnal that was published in the United States. It was called Kentucky Harmony, and it was written by, arranged by Archibald Davison, who had never set foot in Kentucky because he was from Virginia. And he thought at that time that this far western music that they were singing way out in the western edge of civilization, Kentucky, which it was at that time. It was not a part, it was just getting independence from Virginia. Kentucky harmony. He was saying this is the harmony that they're singing out there, which followed what we call the Second Great Awakening, big revivals that took place in the part of the country I live in, over on the Red River near Nashville. And those songs that we were singing were in 2 and 3 part harmony. The melody was in the lower voice, but the high voices would sing this high lonesome part. It was sort of a descant. And there was 3 parts to it, and they read shape notes. They were characterized by shape notes. What further developed was 4-part shape note singing. And here's the thing about shape note that makes this really unique to me, is when you have, and you're reading shape notes, you do not have what we call leading tones. And that means, and let me give you a scale. A C major scale, if I may, this piano probably won't be in tune. These are pianos that end up this far down the hall from the section. They're not, here's a C major scale. The 4th was a little bit off. So if I leave off the leading tones on this, which is the only two intervals in that scale that have half steps between the next note. Here it comes. Whole step, whole step. Here's the half step. Whole step, whole step, whole step, and here's the half step. Shape notes songs did not use those half step intervals. So here's what a shape note scale would be. Okay? Often it's the same, we sometimes call pentatonic, which is a different scale, it's just the black notes. Okay? And these are universal scales. The Chinese have pentatonic, but they name the scale differently depending on what note you start on. So here's one scale in Chinese theory. Here's the second scale. Here's the third scale. Each one of those has a different name. We in the United States just say pentatonic, 5 notes. They have and I bet some theory, here's the Utah theory. Was there another name in the United States for y'all ever heard of another name for maybe major pentatonic, minor pentatonic?
In guitar, I would say they do like a major, minor, pentatonic scale. That would be the place. String instruments was what
Let's call that.
Most, yeah.
So we have at least two.
Like an E minor, G major,
pentatonic. So we relate to that, so we can understand that. Okay, guys, we're talking nerdy theory talk. But the thing about that is that the shape note hymns did not have leading tones. So that's a unique sound. When you leave off thirds, rising thirds and rising sevenths, when you leave those out of your arrangements, it changes the whole sound of harmony. And that's the harmony that Ralph Stanley and these guys in primitive Baptist churches grew up singing. And they're the ones that started this form of music. So the early songs were arranged the way shape notes were arranged as well. That's the way they thought of harmony. So you get these open chords and things that sound really different, and that was the root of what we had in shape note. The most distinguishing thing is you have this high note that kind of, if you hear Del McCoury sing, you hear that voice over everything else. He may not be singing in the mixed melody. Okay, short version of what makes that sound really different than other kind of harmonic sounds. So those are two things that really show you bluegrass music. The 3-part with the high lonesome voice, the unique instruments. Now they're still telling stories. They have a whole group of stories that they that bluegrass likes. We like to sing about trains. We like to sing about alcohol and what it can do to you. We like things of that nature. We also like to sing about love and great stories. Let me read to you out of the book here a little bit on what makes bluegrass. I called chapter 7 a high lonesome sound, and here is Mr. Ralph Stanley and Bill Monroe at the Station Inn, which is in downtown Nashville. I still go there. You can find live music there every night of the week, and it's always bluegrass. I saw Alison Krauss in there one night just listening. It was just like, wow, I can't believe it. But let me tell you what makes bluegrass bluegrass. I write it really succinctly here, I think. Here we go. Is that it? I don't like that chapter as much as I like. Characteristics unique to bluegrass include the combination of the mountain instruments, fiddle, banjo, guitar, mandolin, and bass, the shape note voicing that included the high part above the melody, the high lonesome note, as a standard feature, the punctuated added turnaround measure added before starting a new verse. You all know what that means? I discovered this kind of late, but I always wondered, why is there an extra measure at the end of a bluegrass verse? It falls symmetrically into 4 measures, 4 measures, 4 measures. But then the last strophe, the last line, there's 4 measures and there's 1 extra measure. Well, I finally figured out at the Ryman, and that extra measure was written, I'm convinced, because you're playing along and you got to get out of the way, because there was one microphone, just like this. There's one microphone at the Ryman back in the day, and someone's up there, and you're letting somebody else come in, and you had to get out of their way. So they wrote in one measure in bluegrass. You'll hear it. One extra measure that stays there, even though we all have mics now. We have that extra measure that's called a turnaround measure, a turnaround note. And then here's this fun. The classic, it's called a G run. You hear it in bluegrass. Bum ba ba da ba da ba dum, bum ba dum ba dum bum, da 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 dee da. You hear variations on the G run. And that is such a cool thing. I just brought this to show you all. I call the G run. I had a t-shirt made out of it that I love wearing. And in fact, a school sent me a group of these t-shirts because they had it made for all their kids. It says the G run is the genome of bluegrass music. And they put the G run right there on the thing. But I call it the genome of bluegrass. You will hear that turnaround or that ending little note. Majorly in bluegrass, country started stealing it, but bluegrass did it first. And then here's the thing that I think we all really probably recognize first is that the frenetic, driving rhythmic pulse and undercurrent microrhythms, fast playing with laser accuracy and tuning. My friend that I play with from down in Georgia, Chuck Nation, he says the motto of bluegrass players is to play faster, hotter, and louder than the guys around you. But they all do it in the most humble look. They're all trying to outplay each other all the time, which is just hilarious. You watch it, unless you're seeing something like the Punch Brothers, who are just from another planet, and they're clearly just out of their heads playing great stuff. But most bluegrass bands look very humble, and a lot of that is about Mr. Bill Monroe, who was trying to fight back against the stereotype of what had happened with country and western singers who looked like derelict, drinking, carousing, bad, western wear dressing. Bill Monroe dressed him up like Colonel Sanders. He looked like fine Southern gentleman with a bolo and a white hat and white suits. And he insisted when they came out in public that they look like that. And bluegrass bands started adopting that sort of gentlemanly coat and tie look. Have you seen bluegrass bands that wear coat? They're trying to get the counter country image that was portrayed by Lower Broadway in Nashville and so on. So those are the characteristics that you'll see in bluegrass music that grew out of really these early beginnings. Now, Mr. Monroe, the Kentucky, the Bluegrass Boys, Ricky Skaggs, Kentucky Thunder, all of those groups, the form itself really only hails from around 1935 forward. All the roots that I talked about, of course, go back to England and Ireland, but the modern form that we got to know after the Bristol recording sessions and then the early recordings of the bluegrass bands, that's really 1940s on. And they were experimenting like crazy. There were times that they would have accordions in bluegrass bands, trying to see if that will work. You had the dobro, that's still sort of a third cousin that comes in and out of a bluegrass band. You'll see Jerry Douglas playing in a bluegrass band, but really those were just kind of experiments that dip in and dip out. You saw the harmonica in early bluegrass bands. Another thing that the bluegrass bands early on had was they had a comedian. There was one guy in a bluegrass band that was, if you remember Homer and Jethro, early on, they were the comedic version. String Bean that used to be on, what was that TV show? Hee Haw. String Bean. He was the comedian. And bluegrass bands tried to incorporate a comedian. And that was a carryover from the minstrel shows. And I went down to East Tennessee State University and looked through all their archives. I have 100 pictures from East Tennessee State University Library of bluegrass bands that were experimenting, believe it or not, with blackface. Trying to bring in the minstrel, whatever worked. Well, that didn't last. Yeah, and neither do I think any bluegrass bands want anybody to know that was actually in there. But those pictures were there. That they had one of their members, the comedic guy, would come out in blackface. Well, they got rid of that. They kept the comedian, and they still, if you ever hear them talk, there still is a very funny banter that somebody in a bluegrass band will always be the person that can take that forward. So they hold on to that just a little bit. And I get a kick out of it because I relate it way back to their beginnings, whether they know that's where it came from or not. I get a kick out of it. So this bluegrass form that you all, hope you'll hear Angel Band, you're going to hear three movements that are absolutely inspired by bluegrass. The Angels We Have Heard on High that ends the piece. I get to play pretty fast banjo on that one. I feel like that was one of the original. I think the Angel song was probably a bluegrass song. I think when they sang about the Jesus birth, I believe if you're singing the Shepherds, you're probably singing bluegrass. So I figured it was probably bluegrass style, and I adopted that. The Magnificat, Mary's song, I set that bluegrass style up. My soul magnifies the Lord, my Savior, and my spirit rejoices in God. Glory, glory to the Father, glory to the Son, and glory to the Holy Spirit, magnify the three in one. You all know it, all right. That doesn't happen very often. That's pretty good. Father, that's pretty close, isn't it? Pretty close to the scripture. All right. So I tried to paraphrase it. In fact, I had in the Magnificat it says, "He will drive the rich away. He will shoo the rich away." I wanted to put a little bit more hillbilly language in there, but I couldn't find too many places to do it. So, but I do that one, and then of course I had this wonderful Stephen Foster song. This isn't bluegrass, but it's Americana on "Slumber, My Darling," which I did discover by listening to Alison Krauss. She sings that with Yo-Yo Ma. Playing cello. Oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. But I discovered that song, it was a Stephen Foster song, and as a Kentucky boy, born in Kentucky, I never knew that song, so I incorporated that as a lullaby after the Magnificat. The other songs are shape note inspired or Appalachian tune inspired that are in Angel Band, and I think you'll hear some of those stylings coming out. Well, y'all been really patient. Maybe we can do a little back and forth. Some of you are singing the work, so you might have some questions about anything else in there, or anything else that I've said, or anecdotes that you know, or what I'd like to add from the mountain songs that we sing. Any thoughts or questions or comments from you all? Yeah.
Can you didn't mention anything about a dulcimer.
Yeah.
I wanted to see what kind of relation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Dulcimer very much close related. 3 strings. Early dulcimers are 3 strings. They are fretted. They have a fret on the board. They are referred to often in English ballads, dulcimer. So that we are pretty sure that instrument probably comes from the British Isles. Yeah. Very delicate sound. The hammered dulcimer, we have a dulcimer player in our concert.
We do.
And that's you.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the hammered dulcimer? Was that an American, or was that does that go back to Europe too?
It goes back to Europe, and you find different versions of it all over the world. Not always tuned the same.
Okay.
So it probably came to this country from the British Isles
As well.
possibly.
Yeah. Thing about the hammered dulcimer is that, we wrote a part, but he has to memorize it, because you can't look at music and see the string. So he's done probably more work than anybody in order to.
Well, I play by ear.
That's fine. I wish more people would actually say that, but they try to read what I wrote, which I say, don't do that. Just follow the harmony, right? Well, thank you for doing that.
I'm
That's
glad
great,
to
yeah.
hear
Good deal. Other questions or thoughts about it? This is tuned, he mentioned tuning, this is tuned to an open G chord. So that it's not like a guitar, which you strum a guitar, that's not a chord, well, it's a chord, but it's not a major minor chord. It's got a couple of non-chord tones in, depending on what you think. But this one is, typical tuning is G. With that G string that no one ever plays with that one. It's a drone, so you're playing around G all the time. Your 4-string banjos can be tuned differently. Yes.
So if you capo,
Yeah.
how do you capo a 5?
You just have to take the drone back up
You just retune it.
yeah, unless you're playing in another.
Okay, I just wondered.
Yeah.
I had to use a mandolin capo for the first time Wednesday.
It depends on if I'm playing a better key. I'll either take a second banjo sometimes and retune it
Gotcha.
rather than use the capo.
I got you. Yeah, you don't really use them in mandolin either, so
Okay.
it was
Yeah.
interesting.
It was a hoot.
playing with a stage band, so it had all of these horns in it. They all wanted to play in flat, like I think it was in A flat, and that was not.
We
Really
don't do flats.
It's not really accessible for us. I just capoed.
We don't do flats. That's what
No.
that's in our contracts and in our life.
So I had a guitar teacher at one point, but he played with the idea of, had a Coke bottle on one finger,
Yeah.
using that. So where does that style fit into
That's
this?
lap steel or the steel guitar. Yeah, that's a beautiful. I love that wailing sound of the Coke bottle. But yeah, of course
But that's also mountain music?
Well,
Or,
the dobro. I mean, I don't know. I'm not the guitar itself. I don't know if that's used in other countries like it's used on the lap steel that we. I don't know the history of the lap steel.
okay.
I don't know when that was added. Anybody know lap
The
steel?
other thing I know it in is in jazz and blues where they use it on just a regular guitar.
I would really go blues with it because that sounds a lot more like a front porch addition down in the Delta, you know.
He was East Tennessee Mountain.
Now Hawaii, you hear it.
Yeah.
Good point. Big time.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how that connects to.
Well, and the connections are always weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I know when my mind was blown when I found out that some South African styles came from missionaries from the United States that took things over, and I thought that was South African until I discovered, no, that was Southern Gospel. So, migration theory is amazing when it comes to music, yeah. Yes.
Hi.
Hey, how are you? Good.
So about the Mass specifically, some of the sourcing you did for it, movement 3 comes from a Swedish folk melody, right?
Yes.
It feels very left field for everything else going on.
Okay.
It's my favorite piece, not only because I have the solo, but like it's a beautiful piece that feels very different than the rest of the influences.
Yeah, we saw that video of that that Finland girl out in the middle of an Arctic
Oh, yeah.
forest, and I fell in love with that tune, and I just felt like that was a universal. I mean, that tune is so haunting, right? So I did that. I grabbed that tune, but I put it on a much shape note based hymn text.
Okay.
So the tune does go back to Europe, at least to that YouTube video. But I love that tune too. Yeah, that's a great
And
thing.
that sort of bagpipe nature of
Yeah.
that.
Oh, it's so good, yeah. I think we put accordion in. Do we have an accordion in our performance? That's you. So you get to.
I'm excited to be here.
All right, great. Very cool. So we try to throw that into that, something about accordion sounds take people to another place, don't they? I hear an accordion, I'm immediately transported to like Italy or Europe, and it just takes me away. So, yeah, look forward to that. So, yeah.
Maybe one more question?
Yes, one more
If
question.
not from me, but
Yes,
if anybody
sure.
has
Yes,
another
sir.
one.
Is there any influence from Prohibition, Scotland type of aspect of bluegrass and mountains, highlands? That
Certainly the bagpipes are there.
Bagpipes.
I think the banjo is just a different version of a bagpipe kind of instrument with the drone and the roll idea. so the bagpipe is perhaps one of the biggest pieces. The fife itself, the penny whistle, that instrument, again, we incorporated that into Angel Band because that's a European connection. And I hear that, not the bagpipe itself, but the lead melodic note, that reed, speaks to me, and I tried to incorporate that. I didn't put bagpipe in it because it's really hard to tune. Well, it's impossible to tune by bagpipes, but it really, I mean, that's not negative to bagpipes. It's just, it's like, it's trying to tune a sheep, you know? How do you do that? So but I wanted that sound, but bagpipes are notoriously hard, they crank up. There's no way to enter a room quietly if you're a bagpipe player. Yeah. In fact, when I do them at church, when I use them, we give them a spot to crank it up and warm it up before we open the door. Because it does sound like you're hurting children. But it's a fun instrument, it really is. And it's haunting. It takes you right to the British Isles, doesn't it? All right, well, this has been fun for me. I brought books. I don't make my living selling books, but I did bring them. I tell you, this is so much fun. My mother has now seen my books in, get this, Cracker Barrel, Walgreens, and Kroger's. I have arrived. So anyway, all to say, I don't make my living doing, but I do bring them because I think you all are interested. The nice thing about these Arcadia books, and you all have one, I'm sure Harriman's got a book written about it that looks like that. But the nice thing about it is the contract, you have to provide 150 images to get these, they require 150 images. Well, that's where my book started because I have these images that I got from families that I just interviewed all over the place that would go get a shoebox and would share to me family reunion pictures. And look at that in the style of what I was asking for. So the real fun thing about my pictures are this book is that really a lot of it are the pictures. But I built the pictures around the story. So when you see the picture, which was the hard thing to do, and often I will use music examples like here's a song that came from the British Isles called "The Lonesome Valley." Well, lonesome, I mean, that word was in the vocabulary before Bill Monroe, and there it is. So a lot of the images that you have in here are really images unique to the story that I'm telling you. But anyway, I have those with me. I'll be here all day today and tomorrow. If you're interested, we'll talk about it sometime. So thank you all. Let's go back. Thank you.